Namaste and good evening, everyone. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMFRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, extend my heartiest welcome to you all to IMFRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we are here for a special lecture on Myanmar's coup, Rohingya genocide, and failed democratization. The lecture is being delivered by Dr. Muang Serni. The lecture is being organized by Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies at IMFRI and Counter. I would now like to request Dr. Simi Mehta, who is CEO and Editorial Director at IMFRI, to introduce the program, our speakers and chair further. Thank you. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone from India. And thank you for leading us into the discussion, Ritika. This is a very important topic that we'll be discussing today because the challenges and the events in Myanmar have their implications across the borders into India. And today we have a very, very renowned speaker, Dr. Muang Zarni, to be speaking on the topic today. So I would like to introduce, it is my privilege to be introducing Dr. Muang Zarni to all of you. He is a UK-based fellow of the Genocide Documentation Center, Cambodia. He's a co-founder of the forca.co, a Southeast Asian activist organization, and Burmese coordinator of the Free Rohingya Coalition, with 30 years of engagement in activism, scholarship, politics, and media. And while a student in the US, he co-founded the Free Rohingya Coalition in 1995 and was widely recognized as a pioneering activist who effectively used the emerging internet at that time for human rights activism. He blew the whistle on Myanmar's genocide with a 3-year study with Natalie Brinham of the slow burning genocide of Myanmar's Rohingya, and through a journal called Pacific Rim Law and Policy Journal 2014. And he worked on the reworking of the colonial era Indian Peril, Myanmar's state-directed persecution of Rohingyas and other Muslims in the Brown Journal of World Affairs 2017. And he has written a lot on the issues. He has taught and held research fellowships in US, Europe, and Southeast Asia. He's a regular commentator on human rights, genocide, and Myanmar current affairs in the mass media. His writings have appeared in noted outlets like The Times, New York Times, the Time magazine, the Guardian, the Washington Post, among several others. And he also regularly writes for the Anadolu News Agency. And for his impactful scholarship and activism, he was recognized with the Cultivation of Harmony Award by the Parliament of the World's Religions in 2015, and also was shortlisted for the Sweden's Right Livelihood Award in 2018. So it is an absolute privilege for us, sir, to be having you and hosting you this evening. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I would also like to introduce to you our chair and moderator for the day, Dr. Niranjan Sahu. He is a senior fellow with the Observer Research Foundation's, the top think tank of India, the foundation's governance and politics initiative. And over the years of his expertise in governance and public policy, he leads studies and programs on democracy, human rights, federalism, electoral reforms, especially those related to political funding and cross-cutting issues like exclusion, insurgencies, affirmative action and inclusion, etc. Sir has been a recipient of the Asia Fellowship in 2009 and was a former Sir Ratan Tata Fellow, and he currently serves as the South Asia member for the Carnegie Rising Democracies Network, where he debates and writes on democracy, foreign policy, human rights, and other related issues. Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to moderate and chair the session. And it is very obvious because of your expertise in the field that this is going to be a very lively discussion along with Dr. Zarni. So thank you so much to both of you. And over to you, Dr. Niranjan Sahu.
Thank you, Simi, for nice introduction and for initiating this particular debate, which is at a very critical juncture. If you look at the trajectory of the coup that began in February in Myanmar and how things have unfolded in last 3 months. So I think it's a good timing to have someone like Dr. Jarni, whom I know for several years and whose works I've been following. And, he's a kind of inspiration for many, people in Southeast Asia, especially for his stand on Rohingya issue. I mean, the kind of uh, 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 international kind of lukewarm support that we have seen actually to that particular issue of Rohingya, who are stateless people, and they have no big actually backer anywhere in the world. So he's one person actually who has been mounting global campaign in UK, US, and many other places to highlight and draw attention to the Rohingyas plight, and seek all kind of cooperation. And of course it is also a fact that he's been also in exile for a long time, because of his sort of stance against the military junta, and he's been fighting, and he's been fighting whichever forum possible, in whichever means that is possible, to bring and sustain democracy in Myanmar. So having him, I think it's a great opportunity to listen actually what's happening in that geopolitically crucial country in Southeast Asia. And because we also share a long history and a long border with Myanmar, and we two countries are so close culturally, and in many way we have a civilization link. So I think India has a special role in what happens in Myanmar, and India cannot just remain a mute spectator. So having said that, I'll not actually take much of the time between the audience and the main speaker. I would actually invite Dr. Jarni to basically give us a kind of sense what's actually happening to Myanmar in last 3 months, especially since the February kind of that coup happened, and we have seen more than nearly 1,000 people have been killed so brutally. Many of them are actually children, women, and this regime has been very, very brutal. Actually, it doesn't really distinguish even unarmed civilian and people who are peacefully protesting. And we have also seen the kind of massive protests that have erupted in the country in the last 3 months, and which is not ebbing. It is actually growing much stronger by the day. As much the repression is happening, the kind of resistance is becoming even stronger. So in a sense, actually, I would say that Myanmar is at an inflection point. It was never like 1988 or 1990, when military could actually do anything and get away. I think, and the kind of also if you see the response of the many countries, which is not very vocal, or I would very proactive, but in many way I would see that Myanmar is getting isolated day by day, especially this junta and its repressive way. Even it doesn't find support from many of its earlier kind of including China, which might be doing insidious thing, but it is not openly supporting the regime. So that's something very interesting point. So I would actually invite Dr. Jarni to give us a kind of sense where, in which direction, why this coup actually happened, and what are the actually factors that led to this coup, and how this has panned out in last 3 months, and what is the actually future in terms of democratization, and then many other issue involved in that, because the democratization has also its clear link with fate of the Rohingya, because they're stateless and millions of them are they are in Bangladesh and in other parts. So what is their future as well? And then where from we go here actually in terms of next sort of course of actions. So over to Dr. Jan.
Thank you very much. I think,
Yes,
Niranjan, your connection might have dropped. I have. Oh yeah, you're back. Your image was frozen, and so. But I want to first thank the organizers and also the host, Dr. Arjun, and also the the.
I think
Simi.
it's coming.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Jarni, yes. You can continue.
Okay, I just want to express my gratitude to the host, IMPRI, and all the key organizers for arranging this event. And also, I want to express my heartfelt, concern and particularly for the people of India in this extremely difficult time. And we watch, how COVID is, you know, damaging the Indian public. And Professor Amartya Sen would say that I think like he's still healthy and alive in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but he would be very pained to know that the Indian that he loves so much and he cares so much about is mismanaging the entire pandemic by the current government, because he studied famines in China and in other places, and he blamed it on the repressive political system. And I think when this happens to his own Indian civilization, I think he would be so pained. And many of us are, as Dr. Niranjan said, Burma is very much linked civilizationally to the Indian subcontinent, not just India, but Bangladesh, Pakistan, because all these, the ancient philosophical civilizations, spiritual ones, we are integrally connected to. And so the Burmese are very much aligned culturally with India as well, minus the caste system. So I think that what is happening is very much against any ancient philosophy that teaches communities and people to care for one another, and to refrain from violence. The precisely what the military has been doing over the last 3 months. If we just stay focused on the events of the 3 months, you will realize that the kind of governmental behavior that the Burmese military has displayed is really on par with the essentially all terrorist organizations, Boko Haram, the ISIS, or Daesh and other places. And I don't use the word terrorism or terrorist lightly, because the term has become rather problematic, because it's been misused by the United States and other external powers or global powers to go after the armed resistance movements and or revolutionaries, and also legitimate uses as well. But in this case, what I would say is that before we get into how the coup took place and what triggered the coup and what it has been unfolding, I want us to really look at the nature of the regime. This is really important. Yeah, we have a situation where a national armed forces, that had enjoyed, the fluctuating degrees of support from within the Buddhist Burmese majority, with, shared, I would say, racist and nationalistic sentiments with the military. So there was that was what brought Aung San Suu Kyi and the Burmese military to the negotiating table, and then some kind of if unequal, working partnership, some kind of power sharing arrangement, because Aung San Suu Kyi, despite all her rhetoric about Buddhism and liberalism and human rights and whatnot, is fundamentally a nationalist, and she sings, or she sang, from the same hymn book that the Burmese military uses. And so, from this shared nationalist, racist, culturally chauvinistic space, the Burmese military has gone too far. Even for the the Burmese majoritarian Buddhist society that went along with the genocide against the Rohingya. Of course, I am Burmese, and I'm from a Buddhist and extended military family background. And so, I spoke out against what my own country was doing to the Rohingya Muslim, who are also our own people, right? Burma is like India, multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-faith, and some would say multi-civilizationals, right? This is not simply, a modern nation state. It has like a divergent civilizational foundations, and we cannot disown Muslims simply because they don't share Buddhism as our faith, or like they look darker and more Indo-Aryan than Mongoloid, which is the, what majority of Burmese are, like, lighter brown skin or yellow skin. And so the fact that the nationalist army that had alienated even the majority Burmese in whose name they exist, in whose name they operate. They always say this is, we are discharging, the protective function. We are serving as the guardians of the nation. We are defending the integrity and sovereignty. And, the single most extraordinary thing that took place since the coup, solely because of the terroristic nature of the Burmese military's response to, essentially peaceful exercise of the right to, public expression, the right to protest. These are all fundamental to any type of democratic societies, or country or systems. And so when the Burmese military responded or resorted to terroristic methods like, summary execution, snipers. You don't bring out snipers to kill unarmed civilians who are in their teens. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you use to, if you think that you're confronted with suicide bombers, whether in London or in Washington. So the Burmese military has deployed snipers on rooftops, on the street corners, wherever, like, or even on telephone towers and whatnot, in broad daylight in cities, like, Burmese snipers in national military uniform, murdering in cold blood, like young protesters, completely unarmed and peaceful, right? And then, like, you've got summary executions, like poets and dissidents and whatnot. They were taken out of their homes and, just shoot them, like very much like a Schindler List, Nazi film style. And so what happened is actually two things. One is that the Burmese public, drastically adjusted their perception of their own national armed forces based on the armed forces' behavior, conduct, and treatment of unarmed civilians, right? So at this point, like, 90 days after the coup, the Burmese view our own national armed force as nothing more than a terrorist gang. And this is also, the label that the Strategic Advisory Council on Myanmar, it's it's a body based in Seoul, but made up of two former members of the UN fact-finding mission, the former Attorney General of Indonesia, Marzuki, and former Human Rights Commissioner of Australia, Chris Sidoti. And these two gentlemen team up with Young Hee Lee, South Korean professor and former special rapporteur on human rights in Myanmar. Three of them formed this Strategic Advisory Council on Myanmar with the purpose of essentially providing the grassroots Burmese activists international policy platform so that their voices would not be drowned out by powerful human rights NGOs like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International or others. And so this body, made up of very credible and seasoned international experts on human rights, called the Myanmar military officially, in March, nothing but armed gang of terrorists. Yeah, and then these are people that are not grassroots activists, who are loose with their words, but they carefully chose their word. So the first thing to know is Burma does not have a national army. Burma, in the eyes of the Burmese public, we have a terrorist group, nothing more or nothing less than Daesh, or Boko Haram. You know, I was talking like before I came on this Zoom webinar. I was chatting for about an hour with a few friends in the country. The way they describe is that, you know, there's a blanket impunity that the police and soldiers apparently enjoy, and they can do anything. I mean, literally anything they want. They want to kill, you know, like the Burmese people like bang pots and pans, you know, as a cultural ritual, you know, designed to, you know, drive out or expel evil spirits and whatnot, because like we are part of animistic society. So people believe that, you know, if you bang pots and pans, evil spirits and ghosts would run away from communities. And so if you do, but that has become a form of cultural resistance. And so if you bang pots and pans, and if soldiers, you know, after 8 o'clock curfew, they would literally fire into residential homes, right? And if they don't fire, they would just come and bang on the door, break the gates, and bring people out, and then kick and, you know, arrest. They vandalize, they loot, they, you know, so men in uniform, police or soldier uniform, they would do anything to anyone they want, and there will be complete and blanket impunity. And because the military, you know, views the communities and Burmese people as enemies, and at least like how that's how their behavior signals how they view them, right? And there are children, you know, 4 dozens of them so far. The youngest is 6, who were shot and dead in front of their parents in living rooms, you know. And then a group of soldiers will come in and you know, ask if there's any protester hiding in your home, and if parents say no, and then, you know, to young children, girls or boys, that they will be frightened of soldiers talking, you know, raising their voice, you know, like with military boots coming in, and you know, they will just shoot them. You know, it is very much like, you know, I specialize in Nazism and genocide you know, for as part of my studies in the US, and this is very much like a Nazi film, you know, except that it is happening right now in the 21st century, right next to India, in Burma, right? And so the second point about the situation that beyond the institution, Burmese people of all ethnic group backgrounds and religious faiths feel that they now live in a fascist occupied country. And that, you know, like a lot of people may disagree, you know, debate on, you know, whether this regime is fascist or neo-fascist or terrorist, you know, whether they are still, you know, to enjoy this label as a state actor or non-state terrorist, right? I mean, like, just, you know, all these like expertly, scholarly debates aside, what the experience, the collective experience of the Burmese people, you know, will tell you is that, will tell anyone in the world who will listen, is that they live in a fascist occupied country. Yeah, you cannot, you know, okay, all right, we may be learned, we may know concepts, and we may be sophisticated in the use of vocabularies, and you may debate the finer points, but when it comes to an extreme situation such as you know, the one that exists today, you've got to go with the experience of the people. Yeah, I can't be arrogant coming in with a PhD from USA and say this is how I consider your situation, when people on the ground say we have a fascist-like occupational force. You've got to go with that. Yeah, that's or, you know, respecting local knowledge. We cannot know more than what people are living this situation through. Yeah, and so now, how did the situation get to where it is today? Well, obviously, the trigger was the coup on the 1st of February, you know, early morning, 1st of February, the commander-in-chief Mao Line and the, you know, formed a small group of what they call State Administration Council, SAC or SAC. And, that was to be the leadership of the coup that would take over the reins of the state. And so the two things, one is that, what triggered the coup? Well, May Aung Hlaing was due to retire July this year, yeah, because he is turning 65, yeah, and he already extended himself by decree another 5 years term. He should have been retired 5 years ago, but he was commander-in-chief, and he still is, and so he decreed that his pension age be extended to 5 more years. That's one thing. Secondly, sooner or later, the International Criminal Court, ICC, that is in its second year of full investigation into the crimes of Myanmar's crime, particularly military's crimes against the Rohingya people. I dare say, will issue a arrest warrant to the commander-in-chief and a number of the regional commanders and the top generals, the deputies of May Aung Hlaing. And so he found himself in a situation that Sudanese ex-president, Omar al-Bashir found himself, yeah. But Omar al-Bashir was the general who became the president, and under whose watch Sudan committed, essentially genocide in Darfur, right? And so the South Sudanese president was confronted with this ICC arrest warrant, but he was able to evade this warrant using his sovereign immunity as head of state. He stayed on as president for 10 years. Yeah? So he traveled to South Africa. The African, Interpol would not touch him, right? And so he felt secure. But as soon as he was overthrown by the younger generation generals, and he became an ousted president, and as soon as he was ousted, the ICC and the new Sudanese government or leadership began the negotiation to extradite him to The Hague, to hand him over to the ICC, whether the tribunal takes place on African soil or in the Netherlands is immaterial. What matters is that as soon as his sovereign immunity was removed, Omar al-Bashir finds himself extremely vulnerable to the ICC prosecution, right? So May Aung Hlaing is very much aware, yeah, of this thing. And then you've got the International Court of Justice, but the genocide case that is still ongoing, and and so I think the ICJ does not, because ICJ does not establish or seek individual responsibility of heads of states or others who may be involved in genocide or other crimes. The May Aung Hlaing is saved from ICJ. However, ICJ, the International Court of Justice ruling is very likely to come within the next 2 to 3 years, because there's a mountain of evidence, and so it's just a matter of wading through the evidence and also defense from the Myanmar side, right? And so within the next several years, there are going to be some momentous rulings from world's courts. One, ICJ, that that gets involved with state disputes, and then the other one, International Criminal Court, also in The Hague, that will establish the criminal responsibility of Burmese generals, particularly May Aung Hlaing as the #1 soldier. And
there
so,
is to add on, I mean, there is a dimension that a lot of analysts have been saying that the senior general largely followed the copybook of playbook of Thailand. I mean, so what do you say actually? Is that
well? I mean, the Thailand situation is somewhat different, because the Thai society is quite split, over what they call network democracy. The monarchy, the business elite, and the aristocracy, or the bureaucrats that run or manage the monarchical state, right? And there's a substantial amount of pro-monarchy Thai citizens, right, in different sectors, right? So despite the fact that the king is extremely unpopular, unlike his late father, right? What I'm trying to say is that the Thai military seems to be, you know, a much more acceptable, right, to a good number of Thai people, a good percentage, right? And but whereas in fact the Burmese military no longer has that popular support from within the even the Buddhist nationalistic majority.
I think that's a very interesting distinction you are making, you know, between, you know, the Thai kind of, you know, military, which is not so repressive than, you know, the Burmese say. I mean, just to add on, I mean, there are also a lot of analysts who also have been speculating that, you know, the kind of spectacular victory that NLD achieved in, you know, last year elections, and then there was speculation that, you know, Aung San Suu Kyi, you know, is cementing her position, and, you know, she might also take certain measures which might go against the military. You know, was that also
I think like, you know, I think that when we compare Thai and Burmese militaries, we are looking at the institutional setups and their, you know, relative popularity or power or leverages vis-a-vis the democratic forces or those who demand democracy and freedom, right? In Thailand and Burma, and, you know, there's a democratic and human rights struggle going on in Thailand as well, right? And but you know, but when we talk about, you know, Aung San Suu Kyi and May Aung Hlaing, yes, definitely there is a you know, the personal chemistry that has turned extremely sour. But I think the coups are both personal and institutional act, you know, because like military commanders are individual generals, so they make up personal calculations, and so this is a case where the personal interest of the top leadership, particularly commander-in-chief, but he's also one of the richest and most corrupt men in the world. His family owns about 90 different, you know, companies, and you know, they're getting into like, you know, multi-billion-dollar business deals in different sectors, right? So the, you know, May Aung Hlaing's economic interest, you know, May Aung Hlaing's sense of personal safety vis-a-vis the international accountability processes, right? And so once you leave power, you instantly feel vulnerable, right? So he basically he cannot afford to leave power, right? So it's basically his life, his family's, you know, the wealth and safety versus the future of the country. Obviously, he chose his personal interest and equations over, you know, 54 million's welfare, right? And the other one is the institutional interest of the military. Yeah, you know, a lot of us have been extremely unhappy with Aung San Suu Kyi for defending what we consider indefensible, which was like, you know, that she traveled to The Hague, you know, defended the Burmese military, which her father founded. She had always expressed this, you know, quote unquote, in her own words, genuine affection for the generals, because she considered them, you know, my father's adopted sons, right? Therefore, foster sons. So therefore, she considered them her siblings, right? Like, you know, non-biological siblings. And so, you know, she has approached the Burmese armed forces with too personal and sentimental an attitude to, you know, and so that was her Achilles heel, and that was her own doing. You know, her downfall is her own doing. Yeah, this was the woman that the world consider, you know, in the league of, you know, Mahatma Gandhi ji, and also Nelson Mandela. Like everyone was proud. Asians were proud. The women around the world were took pride in the fact that this woman has accomplished so much in her lifetime, right? Through personal sacrifice, examples, and whatnot. But she made that, you know, she approached the Burmese military from a very personal perspective, my father's army, or like they're like my brothers, right? Whereas in fact, the Burmese military is essentially a huge bureaucracy, armed to teeth with its own institutional, economic, and organizational interest. The army controls. The army has this national mafia-like aspect. Two military conglomerates control billions dollars, multi-billions dollars worth of economic pie.
It's almost like Pakistan. I think the parallel could be Pakistan.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah, totally. So I think when we say the military organizations or state organs, we immediately and I would say falsely grant them some degree of altruistic, nationalistic, legitimacy, right? Whereas in fact, whereas in fact it is entirely possible. In fact, it is a very much a national mafia, because in Indian Army, or British Army, along very professional lines, and the soldiers and generals, they have privileges, they have perks, they have salaries, maybe like high or low, I don't know, but they can live a decent life. But that's it. They don't get rich, right?
Yes,
Whereas in fact, the top Burmese generals are the richest people in Burma, right? How can soldiers become millionaires? I mean, if you look at their salary schemes, yeah. And then,
so in a sense, that also speaks about, their complete dominance over the country for more than 50 years, in a sense to, continue with their kind of privileged powers, hold over, both military, economic, and political life. Now, getting back to the main issue, how do you actually see this protest is evolving, and where does it stand? And do you think that actually has a future in terms of bringing back the democracy and probably building a kind of momentum that would actually lead to a sort of I think re-establishment of democratic process?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the protest movement, right? It took everyone by surprise, right? Including myself. In the early days, during the first week of protest, I was giving interviews and I was very cautious. I didn't want to exaggerate the power, people power uprising and that kind of thing, because in the last this protest movement is nothing new to us. This is the third generation, right? The military has been in power for almost 60 years. It has a monopoly control over the state organs since 1962, despite the limited democratic reforms under the Aung San Suu Kyi and under the previous military regime or ex-military regime of President Thein Sein. And so, but at this point, this is no longer a street protest movement. This is a total revolution. I'll explain what I mean by total revolution. Yeah, the total revolution is a social phenomenon. That has a open and explicit aim of changing the entire system. Either violently or non-violently, or a combination of both violence and non-violence. Violence, armed resistance, self-defense, the use of the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices that became so infamous in places like Afghanistan and other places, right, where the communities that are militarily weak resorted to anything, including I don't condone any type of terrorism against civilian, categorically. I would say this. However, you have to understand, when communities resort to blowing themselves up, yeah, and they have nothing but except their own bodies. This is not to say that suicide bombing or any type of terroristic behavior is acceptable, right? But they can be understood. There's a difference between trying to understand as something and condoning it. I'm not condoning it. I'm just trying to explain that people are so angry and so desperate. They want to change the system. If it costs them their youth, you know, I mean youth, because we have, you know, teenagers and post-teenage, and you know, like the young people in their 20s with you know, individual bright future, university students, yeah, artists, musicians,
I mean,
whatever.
why so much of rage and why so much of, you know, anger, you know, compared to 1988, you know, protest and these particular protest? What actually distinction, you know, kind of difference you see? I mean,
Well,
I
the
could see.
one is that you know, we've got this limited democratic reforms,
Mm,
or you know,
mm,
the relaxation of you know, constraints on
right.
political speech and media. Yeah, and you know, I was extremely critical of the fact that this was extremely limited type of transition
Yeah.
that has been trumpeted as you know, the Burmese Spring, right? However, like you know, with the benefit of the hindsight. Even that limited relaxation of, like you know, political sphere, and a full-blown flowering of Burmese society in
Right.
culture, art, intellectual pursuit, the lifting of the ban on internet, making SIM card available for £1, £2, that kind of, yeah. Uh, so you know, the internet penetration in a country like Burma is extremely high. When I say internet, I mean like a Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So we've got like 80 to 90% internet penetration out of 54 million. So although the education system is, you know, extremely poor and low quality, the young people are able to access the World Wide Web. You know, that they watch, you know, educational videos and entertainment, whatever. In other words, we have an entirely different generation that calls itself Generation Z or Z. And that generation did not grow up with the kind of fear that I
Mm,
grew up with. Say, like I lived under you know, Ne Win's dictatorship for 24 years, and you know, we're always afraid. We're
right.
afraid of, you
Right.
know, soldiers and police. And then the new generation, you know, if you're not taught to be afraid, you you know, I mean, fear is something that, you know, as Aung San Suu Kyi said rightly, it's a habit that we cultivate, right? And you know, the when society is that liberal, forget politics. When society is opening up
Yes.
intellectually, culturally, ideationally, you've got a different type of human beings, and
Yeah.
so that is something that someone like myself, who studied my own country for 30 years, did not pick up on. Yeah. I mean, let alone the generals who are delusional about their own power and invisibility, right? And so we've got a situation where, you know, foreign experts, you know, Burmese experts and generals, we are caught flat-footed because we did not we did not understand and appreciate a new type of Burmese that are
Mm,
growing up fearless, sophisticated in the use of mobile technology and whatnot, right? So this generation also was historically conscious, right? They grew up with their, you know,
yeah.
uncles and aunties and parents who lived through these periods, you know, the extremely repressive, dark periods. They
This
knew what this military is capable of. So
this
they
might
do
might
not
have.
want to go back there. Yeah.
I think this might have also come as a huge sort of shock for the military junta. I think they would not have probably anticipated a kind of a generation that have actually seen the world, you know, because of political opening and, you know, many other sort of
Yeah,
liberalization.
absolutely right. I think like, you know, everybody knew, everyone who studies Burma agrees that the military leadership has vastly miscalculated the
Mm,
response.
mm,
Yeah, they think that, you know, if you kill like, you know, let's just say like, you know, 500 people, right, in 40 different cities, everyone's going to go home and like lock themselves up in the basement, right? But that didn't happen. You know, they killed 80 people in a city called Bago, and the next day there'll be thousands of people protesting, right? And so that the protest movement is just one component. You asked me, like, you know, I started to explain the total revolution. The other one is you know, doctors and nurses and health professionals became, you know, basically you know, revolutionaries. Yeah,
yes.
and then they don't take up arms. They abandon government hospitals, and with the explicit purpose of crippling the entire military from
It's
being able to run the health sector.
it's almost the
These
civil
doctors and nurses,
civil
they
disobedience movement
provide
of
health
Gandhi.
services in, yeah.
I see some resemblance, like Gandhian Satyagraha, that civil disobedience
Yes,
movement,
yes.
against the British.
Yeah, yeah, and also the other one is like transport workers, right? Telecommunications, the also even like government mouthpiece, the Myanmar TV, the official, right? And you literally hundreds of thousands of government employees walk out of their respective offices, right? Don't return. And it isn't a short-term kind of thing. Nobody has to picket anybody, right? And then transport workers stop working, so there are no trains running, right? Even if we call the Burmese military fascist, it's really inefficient and incompetent fascists. Even Mussolini was able to get the trains running, but these guys, these Burmese generals, as powerful as they may be in terms of their arms, they cannot get train conductors to run trains. If you don't run trains, there are no, supply lines are broken. So what this has a major impact on the economy. So the country has no functioning state. The military leaders keep on issuing decrees and orders, right? But they cannot enforce these orders because there's no civil administration, right? And the civil local administrators refuse to work for the military. So this like multi-sector general strike that has been going on for 3 months under the banner of civil disobedience movement, right? And then there's another sector, private sector, like little mom and pop shops, department store, the entrepreneur class, right? You don't expect them to behave revolutionary, and don't join like long struggles because you always associate them with like a profit making. But when the private sector, whose major concern is money making, chooses to forego their profit, so that they could be a part of this revolution, it speaks volume. Profiteers, no longer prepared to make money at any cost. When they realize that this is a revolution, they must join in, right? So like transport workers, like train conductors, doctors, and others, they were given eviction notices, right? They live in government housing. Go back and run the train, or you get out in 3 days. So the families with children or elderly grandparents, they were rather pack up and leave the government housing. And then the other element that needs to be highlighted, because the police have been turned into instrument of repression and subjugation against the communities. There's no police, yeah. So communities are policing themselves, and when the communities police themselves, there's virtually no crime, right? And then all of a sudden, even usually targets of racist attack, like Muslims. We've got like 5% Muslims, the entire country, and then Rohingyas, subjects of genocide. All of a sudden, the majoritarian Buddhist Burmese and formerly racist nationalistic public woke up to the fact that, well, two things. One was, if Buddhist Burmese generals and Buddhist Burmese National Army can behave like terrorists towards us, their own ethnic, religious kin,
Right.
then every story that they have been, unwilling or unprepared to accept became believable. Mass rape of Rohingyas, right? Burning of Karen and Kachin ethnic villages, right? Killing children, right? The deportation by the hundreds of thousands. All of a sudden, the urban population woke up to the fact that this is a fascist-like military. that has been doing this to the national minorities and then Rohingya minorities. So now the key to understand is, if you allow a central national military organization to go after national minorities, as if they were like a colonized, subjugated people, or to go after Rohingyas as targets of basically, total extermination, they're like these generals and their military institution no longer feel a need to draw any line. So they cross the line. And so we've got this continuum of repression, genocide on one extreme, and then in the middle is ethnic colonial subjugation. Yeah. And then crimes against humanity, against your own people, right? So these victim communities, or communities that have been victimized, the national minorities, Muslim minorities, and the Burmese Buddhist majority, all of them decided that this is, no one is coordinating this. This is very organic. Yeah. Okay. So they said, we only have one enemy. Yeah. Muslims are not our enemies. Yeah. They may worship Allah, but that's not our business. They don't pose a threat to our way of life. Christians have different God and different customs. Christians are not a threat to Buddhist way of life. The only threat, the existential threat at that, we have as a people of Myanmar is the army. So therefore, we need to, not simply stop the coup, reverse the coup, restore Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD, within the military's the 2008 constitution, right? That's a limited democratic platform. So all of that is rejected. The Burmese, see, here's the thing, right? That people should take away. The Burmese politics cannot be reset to January 31st. Yeah, no way. Even if Aung San Suu Kyi is released today, she is used by the generals to pacify the public. If she comes up with a platform for reconciliation with the army, she will be kicked out of the country. Mark my word. She is extremely popular. Even she will not be able to tell the Burmese public, multi-ethnic, to reconcile with this army, because in the eyes of the Burmese, and through the experience of the Burmese public, majority and minority, the Burmese military must no longer be allowed to exist as national armed forces. So finally, what the public is pushing for is coalition of different armed ethnic organizations of minorities to lead the country, to create a national federal armed forces to replace the existing one. Yeah, the only way you can replace this army is to defeat and dismantle it. So this is it. This is no longer about a few bad apples, greedy and delusional, who took over the state. This has become the total objective of the movement, which is to dismantle the entire dictatorship system, including the major instrument of repression, which is formerly national armed forces.
Wonderful. I think you're, this is something that I mean, this particular insight about how the Burmese majoritarianism and the kind of thing that army cultivated for several decades, and this was largely targeted the minority population and especially the Muslim, which is actually taking a different shape, which is actually, it looks like taking a positive turn in a sense that majority of the Buddhist population do not feel that they are the real threat. The real threat is somebody else is using. It's like that snake story. That ultimately what we are actually probably maybe this coup and many things that has happened. Ethnic genocide of Rohingya. Other things are really dark history of this country. Other thing, but I see from your insights there are good thing emerging, sort of from this coup.
Yeah, we've got this like emergence of inclusive society.
inclusive
far
society.
more progressive than what you
Yeah,
find in, say, like places like, US or UK, or, yeah. And so, like, well, the state employees, teachers or clerks or whatever, who have worked for 27 years, only 2 years shy of like retirement to enjoy pensions and whatnot, they refuse to go back.
Yeah.
They risk their pensions, right? And then, like, but when poor people who work as like a low-level government servants, when they join CDM, they have no salaries. So the neighbors who have, greater resources would feed the families. If you get kicked out of government housings, communities would find places for you to live. They would, like they will come with truck to help carry things, right? So this kind of like, very progressive, inclusive, that, I mean, like,
and
within
solidarity.
the last 3 months, there have been thousands and thousands of multimedia and social media images and messages, formerly racist Burmese public, celebrities and ordinary citizens and whatnot, saying sorry to the Rohingya, yeah, recognizing the genocide, saying we are very sorry, we did not know, and some people said we knew, but we were racist, we were brainwashed, we take responsibility, we are sorry. I mean, like, it is unprecedented. There's no educational program, there's no anti-racist NGO program, nothing. It is organic,
Organic,
the
spontaneous.
output. Yeah. So I mean, if so this is, completely reverse situation from what happened, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, right? And so all of a sudden, Muslims and the Buddhist monks are, holding hands, yeah? And a Buddhist monk addressed a crowd of protesters, a Muslim imam or whoever would hold an umbrella to protect the monk, and vice versa. You see what I mean? So that this is
Unbelievable. This is
not all
unbelievable,
violent
I think.
and bad. There are some like really positive things happening.
Positive things, because we saw the images of some of the nuns, some of the father, pleading before the army not to, shoot the, armless public and other things. So those images of even Buddhist monk, standing against, the army, other thing, and protecting the people. I think those images will stay long, and this is actually in a way make the society much more inclusive. And I hope this is a sort of a long run process, and it's going to be a long run struggle. But I think there is something positive which is emerging from a sort of, earlier scenario in which, the army cultivated a kind of, society which was, a majority and sort of which benefited it actually to control the, political, economic and other levels of the society. Now, I think we also have got very interesting sets of questions. I think so that we can engage with some of our participants. They have, I think, raised very bunch of questions which are very, very interesting. I think Simi and Arjun can probably help us in getting.
Yes,
Yes.
Simi can proceed. Simi, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Zarni, for your eye-opening remarks and for your wonderful lecture. And thank you, Dr. Sahu, for moderating it so well. Before I really go into the questions, I have a couple of points that I would like to make, and also in turn make it as a switch to the question and answers itself to Dr. Zarni. So, as you've pointed out, the military is the only institution in your country that has the privilege to officially bear arms, and its job is to protect the people. Instead, it has hijacked the country's politics, and it has cruelly punished the citizens who are refusing to accept their attempt to rule by force. And as you've mentioned, they are now widely being termed as terrorists. There is an irreparable trust deficit. So have they delegitimized themselves by killing innocent civilians and by committing mass atrocities? How can there be an overall overhaul of the country and lead the way to a new dawn for a long suffering country like Myanmar? And the coup that was organized on February the 1st, it seemed that there were quite some few predictions that were being made, snarling statements were being made from the high command a few days beforehand. Because for the simple reason that the army was already in control of almost everything that mattered to it. So if we go backwards, even if the coup was predicted, what was it that could have made or that could have prevented this event, and could any safety valve be put in place? And also, I would like to pose this question: that does mimicking authoritarian regimes as democracies prove to be dangerous? Because we are seeing this in parts in India as well. What are India's responses? Because we have avoided, and perhaps Dr. Sahu could also pitch in here, because we have avoided a clear stance in favor of the democratically elected government and also of the civilians there. And this has also opened up a lot of influx of the Burmese nationals, and also the possibilities of insurgencies into the Indian side of the border in Mizoram and elsewhere, with orders to deport them back to the country, to Myanmar. How do you see this kind of security architecture developing on this front? And ASEAN has not been very effective, because last week we have seen that in the ASEAN summit, the military general he attended a very successful summit, and all the observers around the world, human rights observers, activists, they had demanded his arrest. They had demanded the Interpol to arrest him, but it was not. It did not happen. So, are we going to see any kind of ASEAN interference? What about the Human Rights Council, UN Human Rights Council? So, if Suu Kyi was summoned to the ICJ for talking about the war crimes and Rohingya genocides, are we going to see something on those lines for this military general as well? So if you could take these questions, and then in the second round, I could come back to.
So maybe should we also collect some more questions, sir? Then we
no,
go.
I think she has raised a bunch of questions. Let Dr. Janice add on, because India's role also has come, for a lot of flack actually. The way it has avoided, being very critical of the what's happening there, and taken a very kind of agnostic kind of position. And similarly also ASEAN, ASEAN's role has been also criticized a lot actually. It has not taken a kind of role that it is supposed to. So I think Dr. Jani can reflect.
Yeah. Firstly, to Dr. Mehta's statement about the Burmese military being the sole armed organization. I need to make the correction, because we've got about 20 different armed ethnic organizations that have been formed throughout the 60 or 70 years of the civil war, with fluctuating intensities, right? And then so I think that the best thing to understand the Burmese military is it's a national armed forces, that is unable to control various pockets, large pockets of the country, right? So this is not an invincible or omnipresent armed forces at all. This is not, I think like this, you can multiply the Indian Northeast situation by a factor of about 20. That's Burma, right? And so if a large Indian army cannot control the entire, subcontinental India, that this army is far worse, right? So we've got Kachins, Karens and others who control substantial land areas with the different, economies. We have war economies: jade mining, timber, gold mining, right? Smuggling, all kinds of things. And so, I think like it's crucial to see this armed forces as far less powerful than it has been portrayed in the mass media and even like a policy analysis. On the question of the overhaul of the system. Yeah. Well, I think we have passed well past the time of reforms, because you know, the last 10 or 15 years, Aung San Suu Kyi had you know, basically driven home very hard the need for reconciliation and reform. You know, we'll go slowly. We will not push the military too hard. We will bring the military along the reform. Everyone will be happy, right? But it turned out that Aung San Suu Kyi's strategy of reconciling with the military at the expense of inter-ethnic, that is majority-minority relations, has backfired big time. And so now the Burmese public that have been brainwashed, you know, over the last 60, 70 years through the military's nationalistic propaganda, which goes something like this. You know, the armed forces of Burma are the glue to keeping this country together, because different you know, ethnic groups have secessionist or independence inspiration or aspirations. Therefore, we need to have a strong central army to keep everybody in line. But that propaganda collapsed, right? And so now the Burmese majority are looking at national minorities, you know, to be their protective forces. I mean, this was something that was unthinkable only 3 months ago, only 90 days ago. This shift was unthinkable, you know, let alone, you know, programmable, right? And and so, you know, I mean, like, you know, there have been a lot of very angry responses from Burmese civil society, activists and citizens alike, to any expert suggesting that there has to be a negotiated settlement because the generals are not going anywhere. Well, as far as the Burmese public, we want to see them go to their graves, right? If there is nowhere else to go, because the society is no longer prepared to accept them as their own. This, you know, this is like worse than the Yugoslavia in 1995, right? At the breakup of the Yugoslavia in 1994-95, you know, the 6 republics that were held together under Marshal Tito as Yugoslavia, you know, broke apart. And the largest ethnic bloc was Serbian nationalist. Yeah, the Serbia controlled and made up the largest number of percentage of the rank and file, as well as the leadership of the Yugoslavian army. But it was primarily ethnically Serb. Even that nationalistic Serbian army enjoyed the majority of the Serbian nationalist support from within Serbia, right? This Serbian army was involved in the genocide of Bosniaks, or Muslim Bosnians, in Srebrenica and other places in 1994-95, right? We have a national armed forces that no longer enjoy ethnic majority Buddhist support, right? So therefore, reform of this army is not possible, right? The institution has to be dismantled. At least that is the revolutionary aspiration. That's why I keep saying this goes beyond protesting against the coup and the coup regime. This is about dismantling this army, because the common analysis and the common conclusion, widespread across all classes and ethnic groups in this country, in the society, is that the National Armed Forces is the main instrument of repression, the main perpetrator, right? Irrespective of who is commander-in-chief, whether it's Ne Win or Tan Shui or Min Aung Hlaing or someone after Min Aung Hlaing, as long as this institution remains undismantled and intact, the Burmese people will find themselves in a similar predicament 10 years ago, down the road, 20 years. So that is something the Burmese public is no longer prepared to live with. The prospect of the army being recycled as instrument of repression come another round of uprising. Okay, so reforms not, and then now on to the ASEAN. Yeah, ASEAN has been a complete and total failure when it comes to genocides, other kinds of mass atrocities within its backyard. Yeah, in 1975 and 79, there was a genocide in ASEAN's backyard. At the time, it was an original ASEAN members, so only 5 countries, right? And they let the genocide happen right, in its backyard, right next to Thailand, right, in Cambodia. 30% of the entire population of Cambodia perished in the genocide. ASEAN did nothing. If anything, ASEAN lobbied, for Pol Pot regime to retain its seat at the United Nations with the backing, politically and diplomatically, from US and UK. Thailand allowed Pol Pot, that got ousted by Vietnam, backed by Soviet Russia in January 1979. Thailand allowed Pol Pot's groups to come and regroup and retrain with money from China. China pumped in $1 billion to rearm Pol Pot so that they could retake the Vietnam occupied Phnom Penh. Vietnam and China are centuries old enemy, and then Vietnam was backed by Soviet Russia. Because Soviet Russia backed Vietnam, Vietnam control Phnom Penh was not acceptable to US and UK. So you've got strange and unholy bedfellows backing the genocidal regime financially and diplomatically, right? And then Singapore was doing the public relations work for Pol Pot to retain its seat at the United Nations, right? So the genocide, Rohingya genocide, ASEAN failed, yeah? And what ASEAN has done is, in every case of international crime, ASEAN humanitarianized the issue, right? And everything is focused on humanitarianism, right? Well, when you have a criminal as representatives of a country among yourself, like Min Aung Hlaing, you've got to call a spade a spade. This is a guy that is going to land at the ICC's, in The Hague down the road within the next, 3 to 5 years, and you roll out red carpet, yeah, and then that is ASEAN. That's the best ASEAN could do, and you can't blame the ASEAN, because out of the 10 members, only 2, Indonesia and Malaysia, can be considered, having some kind of functional or genuine democratic processing, and the rest of the 8 members, right? They're all dodgy regimes. Absolute monarchy in Brunei, in the 21st century, you would not want absolute Maharaja, yeah, absolutist sovereign. You have Vietnam and Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. These are murderous regimes themselves, and so the ASEAN cannot do much, and it's not prepared ideologically or otherwise, right? And the genocides are international crimes. Even in these situations, ASEAN hides behind its sacrosanct principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of a member state. Well, genocides compel, morally or otherwise, all member states of the United Nations to intervene. Yeah. Otherwise, we rendered the Genocide Convention. Genocide Convention is not simply about trying perpetrators after the fact. It is also about preventing the genocide from happening or intervening in the unfolding cases of genocide. And none of that happened. It's not ASEAN's fault, because Security Council is, for all intents and purposes, is completely paralyzed. And you can say it's been in coma from which it will never come back. Yeah, in every single international issues of major import or significance, Security Council is a complete and total failure, whether it's Syria or Palestine, or the snatching of the Tibet by China, or Ukraine. the Crimea snatched by Russia, Security Council can do nothing, right? And then now, like, finally on India.
India.
I think India
also get China, India and China also, because that's the big elephant in the room.
Yeah, exactly. I think for us, we never look to China as a progressive force. China is a country that essentially is committing a genocide against Uyghur Muslims in in Shanxi. No one can stop it because it's China, right? So you cannot expect China to to come in with a pro-human rights, pro-democracy policy package for Burma, because it is one of the last remaining but very powerful totalitarian political systems with blood on its hand. As we speak, and the 1 or 2 million Uyghur people languishing in these like so-called re-education camps, where women are they were sterilized, right? And they were forced to give up their Islam. They were forced to eat pork, that kind of thing. So that kind of regime, the Burmese people never expect China to have any type of progressive policy. But with India is vastly different. This is a country of Mahatma Gandhi, Lord Buddha, the Hinduism, all kinds of deep civilizational deposits are there. We will be reduced to savages if we don't have Indian culture within ourselves, right? Buddhism, kingship, social relations. Yeah. Like I said, minus the the caste system, right? So we are everything Indian, except that caste system and the dhoti. Yeah. And then we look to India, democratically, India, with all its shortcomings, is the largest democracy in the world. But what did Mr. Modi do? Mr. Modi, amplify and echoes this Islamophobic excuse in killing Rohingyas, right? What is Mr. Modi and Home Minister doing? Well, India has allowed Tibetans to build a refugee city in Dharamsala, right? And then India is trying to even like Supreme Court of India, deem it, okay to deport a handful, in the 1.4 billion people are in India. And then what is the point of making life miserable and hellish for only about 20,000 Rohingyas, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And on top of that, India has framed the Rohingyas as cockroaches and this genocidal language that you hear from the Nazis and the Burmese genocidal. But that's the India that we're talking about, right? And then you've got the largest democracy with look east policy. Well, we are 54 million. We are screaming for solidarity from Indian government, right? We're not expecting anything from China good. But we do expect something progressive and humane and civilizational from New Delhi. None of it is coming, right? I mean, it's a tragedy. I mean, look, to be honest, to expect Modi government to do good for the Burmese is completely misplaced confidence, because Modi is failing his own Indian people. Look at the pandemic crisis. Yeah, this isn't simply natural. This is a complete failure of public health system and governance. Modi privileged and prioritized winning votes over saving lives in India. It's clear, right? So I mean, it is a tragedy.
Can understand your frustration and anguish. As a sort of not only largest democracy but deep historical and civilization kind of bond obviously demands that India play a much more active role, and and make a distinction also with China, because if today we are talking about quadrilateral stuff, and that India should become a kind of front against the Chinese authoritarianism and Chinese illiberalism. then if India doesn't take a kind of stand that Myanmar people deserve at this point, and if it doesn't really become a kind of moral and kind of political force to inspire others, then I think our democratic credential and democratic whatever sort of a claim we are making for several decades, it's actually meaningless. And
brother Dr. Saud, let me just mention just one thing, like very briefly here. I think the anti-China sentiment, not anti-Chinese, anti-Chinese is racism. We cannot allow that to happen. Right. Anti-China, the state of China is so much universally hated in Burma because China has prioritized its factories and gas pipeline over the slaughter of innocent civilians, right? So if like helping the Burmese public to change the political system is actually in direct interest strategically and economically of India, you're gonna win 54 million people, hearts and minds instantly if Modi and the Indian civil society, particularly the government, say, we want the Burmese people to be free from this terroristic reign of the military. That statement will make India's Look East policy extremely successful in Burma. You want 54 million consumers. You want 54 million supporters of India in its rivalry against China, right? We share long borders with both India and China, over 1,000 miles on each side. If I were like an Indian politician or a leader, I would be trying to win 54 million people over to my side to push for my own strategic agenda, right? This is a case of where India's values, civilizational and democratic, are aligned with India's strategic interests. It is plain stupid, to say that, oh, we need to go soft with the Burmese military because the Chinese are going to have greater influence. No. You don't want to, bet on the losing horse. The losing horse is the Burmese military.
I think what you are actually saying is now getting a kind of very strong traction in India. If I see number of policymakers and even ex-ambassadors and several analysts have been now pitching same line what you have been saying, that that we should not be a prisoner of what we did in 1988 by siding with the democratic protest and and Aung San Suu Kyi and other thing, and then later on we paid a political price with the military junta because they preferred China over us, and we were for several years actually paid a price both in our northeast border, especially in insurgents and other thing. But I think time to move beyond that, because we should not just look at only just some few geopolitical and security gains. And for a country of our size and potential, and we have to look at the future of Burma, we have to rally behind the people. Ultimately it's a popular revolt that is happening, and the army is not doing anything just to protect. It's an opportunistic kind of gang, what you are saying, and it is basically fighting to protect its own interest. It's not really bothered about the Burmese society, Burmese citizens and anything. It is basically at this point India has to take a clear and bold decision to side with the citizens and side with the future. If otherwise we will be regretting probably for next I don't know how many decades. This could be a blunder actually. I think the government and the policymaker in India would actually see kind of wisdom in what you are saying. This is a very, very critical moment, and India cannot be a prisoner to it's a kind of opportunistic policy, siding with the junta and trying to get few crumbs and few projects and other things. That should not be the policy of a country that aspires to be a counterpoint to China and a kind of democratic force that carries a lot of moral weight. I think now Arjun and Arjun can
But
actually, yeah, because we have already
briefly.
crossed more
Time,
than
yes.
1.5 hours. So
Yes.
yeah, Arjun, yeah.
We will briefly have some question, but let me also ask a few questions just because. And yes, India being the land of democracy, the idea really is of non-violence, truth, and pluralism. So that should be, you know, as a democracy. I really wanted to ask that, so how do you see the West looking at the situation at Myanmar? Because we have Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Thailand, so many of places, and West has, I would say, very strategic view and interest in this, and they are highlighting human rights and all because of China. How do you see the West is looking at the situation at hand in Myanmar, in all the contemporary developments? And also, I wanted to ask that, so is there anything special characteristic in our land of South Asia? Because these things are also happening in Latin America, South America, Africa, and then we have ASEAN. We discussed what is inherently very significant feature of South Asia, because this problem is becoming a lot and lot about also economic issues. Because when we are seeing Rohingya and other issues, there is also rift even in Bangladesh, that we versus them because of lack of opportunities. So these were two questions I wanted to ask. Quickly, we'll go to Chavi. Chavi, please be brief, and Sakshi. Oh, after Chavi. Yes, Chavi.
Good evening, sir. My name is Chavi Kapoor, and I'm a researcher at IMPRI and an undergraduate student at St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. So my questions were, now what role is PM Modi's Act East policy expected to play in this whole issue? And also, sir, you had mentioned that China would never come with a pro-human rights policy package. But do you think their approach might change considering President Jinping's meeting and Myanmar to sign the four projects of the Belt and Road Initiative? So do you think with the involvement of the Belt and Road Initiative, their approach to the whole issue might be slightly different than what we expect? Thank you.
Right, Sakshi, be quick.
I'm Sakshi, and I'm a researcher at IMPRI and currently pursuing my MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University. So I just have a few questions. So first, you were in the conversation, we were talking about how there is an accommodation to ethnic minorities that has started happening in the populace of Myanmar today. So I was wondering if the ethnic minorities themselves are not facing any crisis of confidence in the population today, and will this newfound peace between the ethnic minorities and majorities sustain, say, after they're able to oust the generals, and will they not take a turn back to majoritarianism? And the second question was also related to this. So I was just wondering what is unique about the majoritarianism in Myanmar that has successfully kept democracy, impeded the growth of democracy in the countries for so long? And one more question, I was looking at what led to the events that have recently happened in February, and I was wondering, was the motivation just the ICJ decision coming soon, or were there some domestic factors also that had played into the military deciding to stump any growth that had happened so far on the front of democracy? Thank you.
Niranjan sir, would you like to add anything?
No, I think, these are actually sets of questions, but the last one we watched, Sakshi said, I think he spent, devoted quite a bit of space about, the triggers for this particular coup. But I think he'll take us sort of quick, because I think we have overstood the time. Maybe another 5 minutes for Dr. Jani to reflect quick.
Yes, and sir, then you can also proceed. Then we go to Dr. Sahu to give his views as a concluding, and then last comment from Dr. Zain.
Okay, thank you. To Dr. Kumar's question, the West, I was just looking at the Foreign Policy magazine, and it came up with the power map of powerful individuals in the Biden administration. With respect to foreign policies. And I was deeply, disturbed by the absence of human rights as a priority area. Like to talk about climate change, of course, like it concerns all of us. economic competitiveness, the U.S. wars in the Middle East, that kind of thing. But neither human rights nor democracy even merited any mention in the foreign policy. This is one of the leading US-based publications, right? And I think like Dr. Shro, who the co-author of piece, not long ago in foreign policy on how, the kind of role that India could potentially play to address the Burmese issue. And so I think like, the United States not putting its money where its mouth is. In other words, like, as long as foreign policy does not have actual human rights defense protection, or like, promoting, not imposing democratic processes across the world, and then no Burmese would say that we're inspired by the United States. No. We were inspired by our own experiences, right? Democracy is not the exclusive property of any civilization, right? That we all learn to be democratic, right? And then by the same token, like, we all learn to appreciate human rights. And, no civilization has exclusive claim over either human rights or democratic values. If anyone says otherwise, that person doesn't know what he or she is talking about, or being dishonest. And so that sums up the the West, because if you look at the major corporations that give the Burmese military billions of dollars in cash or revenues, it's like, French oil corporations, Total, Chevron from USA, Telenor from Norway, yeah. And it's, of course, like, China and Singapore are the top investors in Burma recently, but these Western natural resource extractive industries have been there for the last 20 years, right? And they, they give the Burmese military, $2 or $3 billion a year, yeah, in revenues. I don't have the exact figures, but so what it means is like, the US can say, well, we're going to sanction this company or that company, or put like 6 generals on the sanctioned list. But what they need to do, the United States, as well as the European Union and the French government, what they need to do is like turn off the revenue flow into the Burmese military. Yeah, at some point the military is going to run out of foreign reserves, and that needs to happen. That hasn't happened. Yeah, and in terms of China, China will never privilege or protect human rights over stability. Stability is not an end in of itself. Stability is for making money for China, right? And stability is not the kind of stability the Burmese people want and need. Yeah, we're not talking about human security on the streets of Burma. We're talking about the security of Chinese companies and Chinese the gas and oil twin pipeline. There's a twin pipeline, 800 kilometers in length that begins off the coast of the Rakhine State, goes all the way to Kunming. That's an alternative energy security route vis-a-vis Straits of Malacca, near Singapore, in between Singapore and Thailand. That's where the 70% of the shipment of transport goes through around the world, right? And so China is primarily concerned about economic and strategic security and interest in Burma, right? And China wants to also use Burma as one of the launching pads for its, People's Liberation Navy, yeah. And the other is Gwadar in Pakistan. There are 2 ports that China is desperate to have control over. But Pakistan is a strategic ally of China, so it has guaranteed access to that port. That Burma is a bit unpredictable. So China wants to ensure that whoever comes to power is beholden to Chinese interest, right? So far, China has backed the Burmese military because it feels, and I think like China is miscalculating here, like India.
India.
The Burmese military is, of all the players, despite all the strength on paper, the Burmese military is at its weakest since it was created in 1942, right? And so, China, I would say, the words human rights in China must not be mentioned in a single sentence. You cannot expect a powerful state committing a genocide and displaying extremely aggressive and bullying behavior towards neighbor to respect the rights of anyone. China doesn't respect the rights of the human rights of even its own people. Why would China respect and protect the rights of Burmese and others? And then the last question is Sakshi's question about majoritarian, the potential reversal of this inclusive society back to the majoritarian equilibrium. Yeah, that's all. It's always possible, but I think like my hope is on the not the old generation, but the new generation that no longer care about differences in religions or skin color or ethnic backgrounds. Yeah, they grow up very liberal, open-minded, and they don't worship Aung San Suu Kyi and her brand of Burmese chauvinist nationalism, and they don't hate Muslims. They don't see when they see Muslim, they don't see them as Muslim. They're just like another Burmese, like who deserve the equal respect and rights. The only problem is the intra-minority relations, right? And of course, like in a short talk like this, I sort of presented somewhat black and white picture. Here's the majority and the minorities, but there are two types of conflicts. There's also horizontal conflicts. Horizontal meaning the communals, right? As I speak, there have been attacks between the Shan. Shan is the dominant minority group in a vast Shan state, eastern part of Burma, and they have been the most dominant group for centuries. They built dynasties and kingdoms and whatnot, right? And then Shan themselves are not one group; the multiple communities, and then they are at loggerheads with minorities within the dominant minority state of Shan state. They've been attacked, burning villages and whatnot. The Restoration Council of, Shan state, RCSS is a dominant group. And then there's a TNLA, Ta'an National Liberation People's Force, or Liberation Army. They've been fighting, and that is an extremely deeply disturbing trend. So we cannot, like what is very clear now is the identity based, or I should say identity driven politics is undermining the need and the mission of building a larger confederation out of multiple ethnic groups and multiple religious groups. Yes, of course, you've got to respect customs and identities and histories and memories of different people, but there's identity politics also come with severe baggage because it stands in the way of forging a big tent, inclusive, multicultural society. But in countries like Burma or India, you cannot have one dominant group dictating, who is the real Indian, who is the real Burmese, and then so the only way to overcome this is to see the diversity as the strength, strong foundation, on which a federalist democracy must be built. Otherwise, like, we will always be on the perpetual brink of balkanization. Yeah, that's a danger. That's why I think, there has to be a more liberal, value-driven politics. This is a paradox. People think democracy and includes, this multiculturalism tear people and society apart. No, it is actually the inclusivity and multiculturalism serve as the glue. This is the paradox that we are unable to grapple with because we are so stuck in this rigid understanding of who is Indian and who is Burmese, right? We need to rise above it, or otherwise we will always exist in tensions and conflicts with those who we other as, outsiders.
Yeah.
And so I think I should stop here. I talked.
Yeah. I think wonderful. I mean, the last thing that you said, building an inclusive society, multi-ethnic and multi sort of religious society in which that a sort of confederation or to see sort of a coalition of different sort of groups and ethnic minorities or majority all living together and a kind of shared kind of sort of society in which things should not be just based on your identity and or geography or which part you are based or race or other thing. I think this is where I think hopefully Myanmar will head, and I think this more than I think one hour 45 minutes we have taken. I think been a amazing actually how the time went actually, and it's all because of Dr. Jarni. I mean, so passionate, so involved with the country's different trajectory and different sort of events. I think we would not have actually found a better person to explain us. And just to in 1 or 2 minutes to sum up, I think the 4-5 takeaway from your lecture is clearly that that this particular democratic protest and based on this February coup is remarkably very different than the earlier previous coups, because you are dealing with a different protester altogether, different kind of citizen who have actually experienced some form of political liberalization and some form of freedom, and this especially the young crowd, they have experienced a kind of freedom which they do not want to compromise just by stability or or economic prosperity alone. So I think that's probably is something that will take this country forward. There will be obviously long struggle and there'll be price to pay for that, but I think Burma is at a very inflection point, and I think, and from here I think we will probably see a different Burma. It may not be what Dr. Jarni is saying, that it may not be the same sort of system, just changing the leader, or Burmese army changing its color and and continuing to rule. So I think we might see a sort of change, a permanent change, which might augur well for the country and its democracy. And second thing, I think from here also one can probably hope that the society, the way the solidarity has been happening and the way people are backing each other, and the both majority and the minorities and all coming together under same tent is probably going to be good for the Burma's sort of future. In a sense, it will probably it's creating a kind of foundation for a more inclusive society. There will be always problem. You cannot find a perfect inclusive society anywhere. But I think if they are able to sort out the major issues and are able to accept each other's existence, I think that will serve great for the Burma's future, as as a sort of a country that multi-ethnic country that can live together. And then the third thing, I think, from this particular coup and the protest movement, what is clearly proving is that this is all actually driven by the Burma's own population, own citizens. I think Asian, India, many other countries in the West, I think their support and whatever kind of encouragement they're giving, I think is not really making any great difference. I think without even their support of the thing, this movement will continue, and Burmese will, I think, find something on their own without a kind of external led, kind of, revolution or democratization that we have seen in Eastern Europe or in many other parts. So this is something Burma's own actually revolution, not induced, by external forces that we have seen in many parts of the world. And finally, I would say, I think we probably will see a kind of Burma that actually would, if hopefully everything goes well, would be open to kind of system that that actually would look at issues like secularism, issues like federalism, and those sort of shared kind of sovereignty with minority ethnic groups to live together, power sharing that can happen. I think from here one would see that probably there will be definite progress in terms of a new arrangement in governance, and and laying down some of the fundamental principles of of a new state, not a sort of junta offering that will offer you 30% political freedom and 20% this sort of way. So I think we might see, and we obviously be hopeful, because this particular movement, this kind of resilient protest that we are witnessing is not going to be wasted. Actually, I think it is going to bear some positive fruit. It might be little longish, it might be little brutal, but I think there is no going back. And countries like India and other Japan and even ASEAN, I think, have a chance to I would say bet on the future, not with the same tainted regime, just for getting some sort of economic and trade interest or security interest just protected in the short run. I think they have to invest in the longer run. I think before Simi, I think do we have opportunity for Dr. Jani to say a couple of minutes to close this, or how do we go?
The way forward now. Yeah. Then I will propose a vote of thanks.
Yes. Okay. So Dr. Jani, 1 or 2 minutes to just close your remark with your takeaway, and then.
Well, my takeaway is, politics in everyday life, conventionally is, rightly said to be the art of the possible, right? And diplomats and politicians that we always find, or people always seek a compromise, right? But revolutions are the total opposite. They are the art. Basically, revolutions are mission impossible, right? And also, like, usually the rational analyses fail to capture the essence of revolutionary moments and revolutions, right? Because revolutions are very, very irrational things, right? So therefore, if you're approaching phenomena that are driven by irrationality, passions, passions against injustices, or passions for freedom, right? These are things that defy rational analysis. Why would young people in their 20s who should be partying and clubbing and drinking and having fun and having romantic affairs want to forego their youth, in search of a greater freedom for the entire society? That is completely irrational. Taking up arms, learning to use explosive, right? And risking lives by joining protest. You join a protest at the age of 16 or 18, or you never know you will come home that day. Forget, like, this is no joke. This isn't like, the mom and dad come and, like, find me at a police station, if I get arrested. No, but they will tell your parents, come and get your son's dead body, right? And but you need to pay us money, otherwise we will not tell you where to go and get your son's or daughter's dead body. Yeah, that is a scenario. So when intelligent and young and internet savvy generation decide that they would rather risk their lives and forego their career opportunities and educational opportunities than live as serfs under the military rule. That is such irrational decision. That's why policymakers and rational experts fail to appreciate and understand. That's why, you know, Sovietologists were caught flat-footed when Soviet Union just evaporated. That no one predicted that Berlin Wall was going to crumble in a matter of like 3 hours, right? And then nobody believed that, you know, Suharto would be gone, right? And then so that we are in that moment, yeah? That is why people, experts keep saying, you need to find compromise. You need to find a negotiated settlement. For God's sake, we are looking at a revolutionary situation. You either think like revolutionary or your analysis are going to go, you know, fall by the wayside. And that's, you know, so that's my last comment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Zarni. So let me just quickly take half a minute. And we are so thankful and delighted, but it's also our fortune that we have learned so much from Dr. Zarni today. And it was just coming, it was like coming right, so much very emotion part also. And I will also say the analytical part and the most important courage part, as Sir has really put forth all the dimensions. So on behalf of IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, we are so thankful to our speaker today, Dr. Muang Zarni, for joining us this evening for the special lecture, Myanmar's coup, Rohingya genocide and failed democratization. Thank you so much, sir. And we are also very thankful for guidance and direction of our chair and moderator for the session, Dr. Niranjan Sahu, sir, who is a senior fellow at ORF. So thank you so much, sir, to both of you and all the participants. And we hope that all those who were here, all the participants, we also thank all of you, and those who will be watching this further on Facebook Live and YouTube will also like it and also give their comments for learning more on this subject. And you can also get connected to Dr. Zarni over various social media or website, wherever you can see and learn more. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zarni.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Niranjan
you
sir.
so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Stay safe, sir.
Jani brother, thank you, and for sparing 2 hours of your precious time. And you are a man in great demand, and you are speaking almost every day in different forums. So it was great having you, and we hope to also get you something on Rohingya issues exclusively, because that's something which is not getting attention, unfortunately. I think we'll one of these days we'll also get you on to speak exclusively on Rohingya issue. And Arjun and Simi for organizing this and taking all the troubles, and all your colleagues for helping out this. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
thank you. Have a good evening. Yeah.
Good evening. Stay safe.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Niranjan
Bye.
sir, for coordinating so smoothly.
broader kind of
Yes, thank you.
understanding of the